The warship was scrap, but what protected it was pure. Horror Marek's boots crunched over the dry, cracked ground of Eridon. 5. A planet far from the core worlds, where trade routes were scarce and law enforcement scarce. He had been following a tip from a digital market forum. A hangar abandoned for decades was being sold for 1 single credit. 1. Not 1,000, not 1,000,000, just 1 credit. Most would call it a scam. Marek called it opportunity. The hangar sat on a plateau, half buried in dust and the shadow of jagged cliffs. Its metal walls were rusted, streaked with years of storms, and its sliding doors hung unevenly on their tracks. Even from a distance, the warship inside looked dead. Its hull scarred, its weapons stripped, its engines clearly long gone cold. Marek smirked. To him, a dead warship was better than a live one. Dead ships had no surprises, no risk, only parts and potential. He checked the digital contract one last time. The seller's credentials were untraceable, and the payment method had the kind of encryption most people wouldn't bother cracking. That didn't matter to Marek. 1 credit was all it took to take control of this relic. He slid the transaction through, watched the hangar doors beep open on authorization, and walked inside. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of old circuits. The warship sat in the center, tall, sleek, but clearly neglected. Its surface was riddled with scratches, dense, and what looked like burn marks from laser strikes. It had once been formidable. Now it was a ghost of its former glory. Marek ran his hand along the hull. The metal felt cold and rough, nothing like the smooth finish of a new warship. Between the breath of the red, yet as he touched it, he felt a faint vibration, a subtle thrum that made him pull back. He shook his head. Breaths. Leftover energy from the ship's core, probably. Nothing to worry about. He spent the next few hours exploring the hangar. Crates of old equipment, broken drones, and rusted tools littered the floor. A faint hum came from some forgotten machinery, and Marek noted it. He was already imagining what he could strip and sell. Fusion cores, navigation arrays, weapon mounts, anything valuable. But as evening fell, something changed. The shadows in the hangar seemed to shift unnaturally. Marek froze. A long line of dark shapes stretched across the far wall, as though the light from his helmet lantern bent strangely. Bah! He stepped forward. Nothing moved. Bray. He shook his head again. Dust. Old circuits flickering. He started his routine check of the ship's systems. Marek climbed onto a maintenance hatch near the rear of the craft. He bypassed the first few locks easily. He had been a scavenger for too long to be stopped by standard security. But as he opened the final panel, a rush of cold air swept over him, and the lights flickered violently. A low, groaning sound echoed from the depths of the ship. Marek froze. He told himself it was the wind or the hangar settling. Dest. Yet the sound had direction. It wasn't random. It came from inside the warship itself. His curiosity got the better of him. He leaned closer to the hatch. The sound intensified, almost like a whisper, but not in any language he recognized. He jumped back as a small, sharp spark shot from the panel, hitting the floor with a hiss. Something moved across the deck of the ship. Marek swore and drew his sidearm, though he didn't really believe it would help. Whatever it wasn't alive in the normal sense. It was something else. For the rest of the evening he circled the ship cautiously. Every shadow seemed longer than it should be. Every corner of the hangar held unseen eyes, or so he imagined. Yet no threat revealed itself. By the time he decided to camp for the night, Marek was exhausted, adrenaline making his fingers tremble. But he set up a small fire in the corner of the hangar and ate a cold ration pack, trying to convince himself that the sounds were just tricks of the mind. But sleep didn't come easy. For every so often he would wake to the faint hum from the ship, the subtle vibration beneath the floor, the shadows that didn't match the light. Then, just as he began to doze off, a louder noise cut through the stillness, a metallic scraping from deep within the ship. Marek bolted upright. The hangar was silent again, the shadows inert, but his stomach clenched. Whatever protected this ship, it was awake. The next morning, Marek decided to investigate systematically. He wouldn't touch the interior yet. He'd start with the external systems and sensors. But as he worked, he noticed something strange. Old warning glyphs etched into the hangar walls, symbols that weren't purely decorative, primitive. Some were alien, some primitive, all telling the same story. Do not enter. Marek frowned. He had seen alien glyphs before, had traded in rare tech and old battlefields, but these glyphs felt different. There was menace in the curves, a sense that they were alive in some way. Marek rubbed his chin. Most scavengers would have turned back. But humans like Marek, humans saw opportunity where others saw danger. By late afternoon, Marek had managed to activate the ship's exterior diagnostics. Nothing came online. Engines were dead. Weapons offline. Even the shield generators were fried. The ship was scrap, exactly as it looked. Relief mixed with disappointment. He had expected some resistance, some hidden systems, but nothing, at least for now.
He began cataloging what he could salvage.
Duals, panels, wiring, old fusion cells, small things that could be sold in a pinch. But as he picked up a loose panel near the rear of the hangar, the shadows moved again. Marek froze, staring. A shape detached itself from the darkness, gliding silently along the wall. It was tall, thin, humanoid in form, but its limbs ended in spindly jointed points. Its eyes, or what he assumed were eyes, glowed faintly. It didn't attack. It didn't speak. It watched. Marek's heart pounded, but instinct took over. Bright. Slowly he lowered the panel, took a cautious step back. The creature mirrored him, moving as if in a dark dance. It was intelligent. That much was clear. Burst. Hours passed in this tense stalemate. Marek tried communicating, waving his arms, shouting. The creature didn't react in ways he could interpret. It was a guardian, and its purpose was obvious. Protect the ship at all costs. That night, Marek slept with one eye open. He couldn't shake the sense of being studied. Every so often he felt a cold touch of air, a subtle vibration, like the hangar itself breathed with a life apart from him. And through the thin walls of sleep, he heard whispers, soft, alien, warning him. In the morning, Marek made a decision. This was no ordinary salvage. The ship was more than it appeared. It was alive in a way he didn't understand, and its guardian, whatever it was not a thing to be fought head-on. He didn't know if he was being clever or foolish, but he smiled grimly. Humans thrived where others hesitated. Humans survived the impossible. And Marek intended to learn the rules of this game before the game learned him. As he prepared his tools for another day, he didn't notice the faint marks the Guardian left on the hangar walls overnight, scratches that weren't random, patterns that seemed to shift and change. The ship was observing him. It was learning. And Marek had just become part of its lesson. Marek had spent the entire morning inspecting the warship, checking every panel, every wire, every broken sensor he could reach. He told himself he was just being careful, just trying to understand the ship's systems before attempting anything risky. But deep down he knew curiosity had always been his weakness, and it was about to get him into trouble. He approached the main access hatch, the one that led to the interior of the ship. Its surface was cold, corroded, but he could see faint lines where someone had once tried to keep it locked. Marek's fingers worked deftly, bypassing the old circuits. Each click of his tools echoed in the silent hangar, the only sound aside from the distant hum of the ship's dormant power systems. When he finally pried the panel open, a rush of cold air hit him, like the breath of a predator. Marek stepped back instinctively. There was a sound, low and almost musical, vibrating through the floor. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. Something inside the ship had noticed him. He froze, heart pounding. A shadow detached itself from the ship's dark interior. Marek's first instinct was to draw his sidearm, but his hands shook too much. The figure glided toward him, its form humanoid but terrifyingly alien. Its limbs were long and jointed, ending in sharp points that scraped softly across the hangar floor. Its head was elongated, and two faintly glowing eyes watched Marek with intelligence and patience. Marek swallowed hard. He had faced pirates, wild beasts, and rogue drones before. Nothing had prepared him for this. The creature didn't attack. It tilted its head, observing him, almost like it was trying to decide if he belonged or if he should die. Marek took a careful step back. Another. The creature mirrored his movements, staying just out of reach, almost like it was playing a game he didn't understand. Marek's mind raced. He had learned quickly over the years that fighting what you didn't understand was foolish. Sometimes survival depended on patience, on observation, on outsmarting your opponent. This was one of those times. He lowered his sidearm and raised his hand slowly. "I don't want to hurt you," he said quietly, testing the creature's reaction. It didn't react at all, except for a faint hum that vibrated through the floor. Marek realized there was some kind of communication, but not in a language he knew. The sound seemed to probe his mind rather than his ears. It made his teeth chatter and sent shivers down his spine. Minutes passed. Marek felt sweat bead at his forehead. He knew he couldn't stay outside forever. He had to understand the ship. So he took a deep breath, stepped closer to the hatch, and touched the outer hull. Immediately the vibration intensified, running up his arm. The creature let out a long, resonant hum, and Marek felt something like a pressure in his chest, as if the ship itself were judging him. He jumped back and muttered under his breath, "Okay, maybe Scrap is more alive than I thought." Determined not to panic, he circled the ship, examining its exterior. That's when he noticed faint scratches along the hull. Not random, but patterns. The Guardian had been here before him, marking its territory, studying the ship, preparing for whoever came next. Marek frowned. Whatever protected this ship, it was intelligent, adaptive, and lethal. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a security AI gone wrong. Maybe the ship had bioconstructs designed to protect it from intruders. He had seen alien tech like that before, but something about the way it moved, the way it seemed alive, Marek couldn't shake the feeling that he was dealing with something older than human wars, older than human greed. By midday, he forced himself to focus. He had to test the ship's systems. Using portable diagnostic tools, he tapped into the main console from the outside. Most systems appeared dead. Breaths, engines offline, weapons offline. Shields fried. Life support inoperative. In every way, the warship was scrap, but as he probed deeper, the vibration came again, stronger this time. Marek's fingers twitched over the console. Data flashed on the screen. Cryptic symbols, strange energy readings, fluctuating and unexplainable. Marek realized the ship wasn't dead. It was dormant, waiting. Rasp. And the Guardian was there to make sure no one woke it by mistake. Then the first real danger struck. Marek had activated a hidden relay without meaning to. A door on the side of the ship slid open silently, revealing a dark corridor. From deep inside, the Guardian emerged. This time, it was faster, closer, and Marek felt true fear for the first time in years. Psst. He ducked behind a rusted crate. The creature paused, head tilting, analyzing him. Marek's mind raced. His only options were to run, fight, or hide, and none of those seemed likely to succeed against this entity. Instead, he did the one thing humans often did best. He improvised. He picked up a loose panel from the hangar floor and threw it toward the far side of the ship. It clanged loudly. The Guardian's attention snapped toward the noise, tilting its head in curiosity. Marek used the moment to dash for the rear of the ship, keeping low, heart hammering in his chest. The Guardian moved faster than he expected, its spindly limbs extending, scraping the floor with deadly precision. But Marek ducked into a shadowed corner, holding his breath. The creature paused again, sensing him. It let out that hum, low and resonant, vibrating through the metal of the hangar. Marek felt as if the sound penetrated his thoughts. It wasn't attacking yet, it was studying, judging. Hours passed in tense silence. Marek couldn't sleep. He couldn't move. Every time he dared to peek out, the Guardian was there, gliding, always observing, always calculating. By nightfall, Mark realized he had to try something riskier if he wanted to survive. He needed to communicate with it somehow to understand its purpose. He climbed onto a maintenance catwalk above the hangar floor, putting himself at eye level with the Guardian. He tried to mimic its movements cautiously, leaning forward, stepping back, extending a hand. The Guardian tilted its head, responding with a faint hum that resonated through the floor and his bones. Marek realized the creature was not mindless. It had rules, patterns, and possibly a sense of morality, or at least loyalty to its charge.
He spoke softly. I'm not here to steal.
I want to understand. I want to survive. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Guardian moved slightly aside, just enough to reveal the hatch into the ship, but didn't open the way for him. Didn't invite him in, but it allowed him to see inside. Marek's pulse raced. This was progress. Cautiously, he approached the hatch. Using his tools, he began to scan the interior, careful not to trigger any defenses. The ship's inside was dark, cold, and silent. But Marek could feel the latent energy pulsing beneath the metal floor, faint but undeniable. The warship had power. He could sense it, but only the Guardian controlled it. Bah. Hours turned into night. Marek sat against the hangar wall, watching the Guardian pace silently along the ship's hull. He realized humans often survived impossible situations because they adapted faster, improvised better, and took risks when others froze. He had no idea how he would manage the next step, but he knew he couldn't leave the ship behind. Too much potential, too much danger, too much unknown. And then, just as he was about to doze off, the Guardian emitted a series of short, sharp hums. Marek froze. The sound was different, almost a warning. He looked at the ship's hull and noticed faint, glowing glyphs appearing along the surface. Patterns shifted as if alive, revealing a faint alien script. Marek couldn't read it, but the meaning was clear. Intruder detected. Proceed at your own risk. Marek gritted his teeth. He had no choice. He couldn't run, couldn't call for help, and he couldn't destroy the ship. Humans thrived in impossible situations. Humans survived, and Marek was about to learn exactly what it meant to survive a horror that no human had faced before. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered to himself, "All right, let's see what you're really protecting." Marek had never faced anything like this. The hangar, once a simple place for abandoned machines, had become a battlefield of wits and nerve. The warship, though outwardly scrap, radiated a power he could feel in his bones, and the Guardian moving silently along its hull was no mere obstacle. It was a judge, a sentinel, a horror that tested intruders. The morning sun filtered weakly through the rusted hangar's roof, catching the edges of the ship in cold light. Marek crouched behind a stack of crates, watching the Guardian move with smooth, deliberate precision. Every step it took, every subtle tilt of its head was calculated. He had realized by now that brute force wouldn't work. The creature adapted too fast, learning from mistakes almost instantly. Instead, Marek would need to outthink it. He set to work improvising. Using old wires, rusted panels, and some of the hangar's equipment, he built small decoys. Panels clattered, sparks flew, and holographic projectors flickered weakly from broken consoles. He wanted the Guardian to focus on the distractions while he studied the ship's surface for vulnerabilities. The first test came sooner than expected. The Guardian noticed the decoys immediately. It approached one, bending its spindly limbs in impossible angles, then turned with terrifying speed toward Marek. He ducked behind a console, heart hammering. But then he realized something crucial. The creature responded to patterns. It reacted instantly to predictable moves, but slower to unexpected ones. Marek grinned. Death. Humans thrived on unpredictability. He spent the next hours refining his strategy. He learned to move in small bursts, vary his approach, and keep the Guardian off balance. Each time the creature tried to corner him, Marek would vanish into shadows, leaving faint traces of heat and light behind to confuse it. And slowly, Marek began to notice something even stranger. The Guardian wasn't just a weapon. It was also a teacher. Each test, each encounter, seemed designed not to kill him, but to measure his intelligence, courage, and adaptability. It nudged him toward the ship's systems, like it wanted him to earn access rather than steal it. By afternoon, Marek had discovered a weak panel on the ship's hull, a secondary maintenance hatch that wasn't locked. He approached cautiously, tools ready. The Guardian was still watching, hovering near the main access point, like a predator guarding its prey. Marek inserted a scanning probe. The lights on the ship flickered, and for a moment it seemed almost alive, the hull vibrating beneath his hands. A series of alien symbols lit up on the console, responding to his probe. Marek didn't understand the language, but the patterns were clear. The ship was reactive. It was observing him, analyzing him. The Guardian let out a low hum, vibrating through the floor. Marek jumped back slightly. He realized the ship and the Guardian were connected, as if one controlled the other. He wasn't just dealing with a defense system. He was engaging with a thinking, sentient force. Then the first real confrontation arrived. A group of alien scavengers, hearing rumors of the cheap hangar and abandoned warship, landed nearby. They were heavily armed, confident that the scrap ship would be easy prey. Marek watched from the shadows, realizing he couldn't let them get close. The warship itself could not defend him yet. The Guardian allowed no one inside. He had to use the Guardian. Marek moved carefully, baiting the scavengers closer to the hangar. He set small traps, loose panels, exposed wires, and scattered debris. When the aliens entered, the Guardian sprang into action, its limbs extended impossibly, striking with deadly precision. But Marek noticed something crucial. The Guardian focused on intruders, ignoring him. He whispered under his breath, "It's learning who belongs here and who doesn't." The aliens were no match. Their weapons struck the air harmlessly, the Guardian adapting faster than they could react. Marek stayed low, heart racing as he watched the Guardian dismantle the intruder's assault with terrifying efficiency. Sparks flew, hulls scraped, and the aliens realized too late that the scrap ship was more than a trap. It was a death machine. By nightfall, the hangar was silent again. The scavengers were gone, retreating in panic, leaving their equipment behind. Marek emerged from the shadows, cautious but exhilarated. He had survived, but he understood something more now. The ship and its Guardian could be used if he learned their rules. He spent the next day exploring the hangar and Warship more systematically. Small hatches revealed dormant weapon systems and hidden compartments. Energy readings fluctuated in a controlled rhythm, like a heartbeat. Marek realized the ship could function, but only if the Guardian allowed it. And then came the real test. Marek attempted to override one of the auxiliary systems. The console flickered, lights pulsed, and for the first time the Guardian reacted aggressively, extending its limbs toward him. Marek froze, remembering every lesson from his earlier encounters. He moved unpredictably, ducking and weaving, letting the creature strike harmlessly past him while he adjusted the override sequence. The system activated. The ship hummed with latent energy, sensors flickering, minor weapons coming online. The Guardian receded, observing rather than attacking. Marek exhaled. He was learning how to play the game. Hours passed. He discovered that each interaction with the Guardian taught him something about the ship. The creature was a gatekeeper, not a mindless killer. It would allow access, but only if Marek proved capable, clever, and fearless. Humans, he realized, were naturally suited to this. Where other species relied on brute force or technology alone, humans adapted, improvised, and survived against odds that would break others. By the third day, Marek had made a breakthrough. The ship's hull had a small, hidden console. With careful manipulation, he activated a minor weapons system, a pair of laser turrets on the ship's surface. They hummed to life. Harmless for now, but functional. He tested them on a stack of old crates, watching them vaporize the metal instantly. The Guardian watched silently. Marek could feel its attention, measuring his skill. Grasp. He realized that it was not merely protecting the ship from him, it was preparing him, testing his ability to control and respect the warship's power. Then the second wave arrived, an alien scout team, smaller and faster, trying to take advantage of the chaos. Marek smiled grimly. This was the moment to test everything he had learned. He lured the scouts into the hangar with a trail of debris, leading them past the Guardian. The Guardian reacted instantly. It struck with deadly precision, tearing through the scouts' formations, while Marek controlled the minor systems to add chaos. Laser turrets fired, sparks flew, panels dropped from above. Within minutes, the scouts were retreating, badly damaged and terrified. Marek leaned against a console, breathing heavily, watching the Guardian retreat to its position by the ship. He realized the truth. The Guardian and ship respected him now, in their own way. He had survived their tests, adapted to their methods, and even used them to his advantage. Humans thrived where others failed, because humans could think, improvise, and endure horrors that would destroy others. By nightfall, Marek had made peace with one fact. He wasn't just trying to survive the ship's Guardian. He was learning how to work with it, and maybe even control it, someday. The warship was no longer scrap. It was potential, terrifying, immense, and deadly potential. As he sat in the shadows, Marek noticed the Guardian moving along the hull, almost like it was communicating, its glowing eyes fixed on him, and for the first time Marek understood that he was part of its game. A chill ran down his spine. He had survived alien intruders, learned to navigate the Guardian's deadly tests, and discovered the first real functions of the ship, but he knew the ultimate challenge was still ahead. Somewhere out there, more threats were coming. The warship's Guardian had prepared him for this moment, and Marek was ready, or as ready as a human could ever be. He grinned to himself, teeth clenched, heart racing.
"Let's see who else thinks they can take what humans have earned,"
he muttered. And somewhere deep in the ship the lights flickered, systems hummed, and Marek realized that the horror protecting this vessel wasn't just a machine or creature, it was a proving ground.
Those who underestimated it underestimated humans. And humans, Marek knew, were never easy to underestimate. The hangar settled into an uneasy quiet. Marek sat in the shadows, listening, watching, learning. The Guardian stood beside the warship like a sentinel, silent but alive, and in the distance the faint hum of approaching engines hinted at the next wave of challengers. Marek flexed his fingers. The game was far from over. But for the first time he felt the thrill of control. The scrap ship, the Guardian, and the hangar. They were no longer obstacles. They were tools, and Marek was learning to wield them. The hangar was quiet, but Marek knew the calm would not last. For days he had survived the Guardian's tests, learned the patterns of the warship, and discovered its first hidden systems. Now it was time for the final challenge, to fully awaken the ship and face those who thought it was just scrap. Marek stood on the hangar floor, staring at the hulking vessel. Rusted and scarred, it looked harmless to anyone else. But he knew better. The warship pulsed faintly under the surface, alive and waiting. Its Guardian moved silently along the hull, observing him, eyes glowing like twin lanterns in the shadows. He approached the main hatch. Carefully, he bypassed the final lock, using everything he had learned. Each wire, each symbol, each hum of the ship was a puzzle he now understood. The hatch slid open slowly, groaning under decades of neglect. Marek stepped inside, heart hammering, sweat running down his face. Inside, the ship was dark, but Marek's flashlight revealed corridors lined with alien symbols, glowing faintly in response to his presence. It was alive. Every movement of the ship, every flicker of lights seemed to breathe around him, and the Guardian followed silently. A shadow of menace and protection all at once. He reached the bridge, the central control room. Panels flickered to life as he approached. He placed his hands on the main console. Energy flowed beneath his fingers, subtle at first, then growing in intensity. The ship hummed like a living thing, responding to his touch. Marek felt a thrill he had never known. He was commanding a warship that everyone else had thought was scrap. The first test of this newfound control came almost immediately. Sensors picked up movement outside the hangar desk. Alien scavengers, drawn by rumors of the cheap ship, had returned, and this time they were armed to kill. Marek could hear their engines approaching, the vibration of their craft resonating through the hangar floor. He clenched his fists. There was no hesitation. Humans thrived in impossible situations. Humans adapted faster than anyone expected. He had learned from the Guardian, from the ship itself, how to turn danger into opportunity. He activated the ship's minor weapon systems first. Laser turrets along the hull. The scavengers opened fire, but their shots bounced harmlessly off the reinforced sections Marek had discovered. With a flick of a switch, the turrets powered up fully. Sparks flew as the first blast struck, tearing through alien engines and armor with precision. The Guardian moved beside him, silent but ready. Marek realized that the creature was no longer just a tester. It trusted him. Together, they became a deadly team. The ship moved almost imperceptibly, adjusting its weight and power distribution, responding to Marek's commands like a living partner. The aliens tried to retreat, but Marek had anticipated this. He manipulated the ship's gravity systems, creating a minor distortion in the hangar. Engines misfired. Fighters collided. Chaos reigned in seconds. The Guardian struck silently, eliminating anyone who got too close. By the time the first wave ended, the hangar was littered with disabled enemy craft. Marek stepped forward triumphant, heart racing. But there was no time to celebrate. More forces were on the way. Scouts, fighters, even a small cruiser, drawn by the legend of the scrap ship. Marek's grin widened. Humans were at their best when the odds were impossible. He ran through the ship's systems, activating defensive protocols, adjusting weapons and testing shields. The Guardian moved with him, a silent, deadly presence. Grasp. Marek realized something important. The warship itself was not a weapon until a human took command. Alone, it was dormant. Inspiration, courage, and improvisation, it became unstoppable. The second wave arrived with a roar. Bray. Alien craft filled the sky above the hangar, weapons blazing. Marek pressed a button on the central console, activating the ship's cloaking system. The warship shimmered and vanished from scanners. The scavengers fired blindly, striking nothing. Marek's mind raced. He manipulated the internal systems, guiding the Guardian to strike from unexpected angles, taking advantage of every blind spot. Blasts of energy tore through enemy craft. Engines exploded. Weapons malfunctioned. The aliens had never faced anything like this. They had underestimated humans. They had thought the warship was scrap. Breath. They had been wrong. Hours passed in a blur of strategy, energy bursts, and precise strikes. Marek's mind worked in overdrive, calculating, predicting, improvising. The Guardian stayed by his side, striking where necessary, protecting the ship and the human it now trusted. By nightfall, all enemy forces were gone, retreating in fear and confusion. Marek slumped into the captain's chair, sweat pouring down his face, heart hammering. He looked at the glowing panels, the hum of the ship, the faint movements of the Guardian, and realized the truth. He had survived the impossible. He had conquered the scrap ship. He had earned its power. But the final lesson came as he examined the hangar one last time. The Guardian approached the main console, laying one spindly limb gently against the surface. The alien creature tilted its head, letting Marek see the subtle marks on the walls, the scratches and symbols from before. They were no longer warnings. They were signs of recognition. Marek understood. The Guardian had judged him, tested him, and now it acknowledged his worth. Humans, with their audacity, creativity, and courage, were worthy of controlling horrors no one else could command. He allowed himself a moment of pride, feeling the ship respond beneath his hands. Energy flowed smoothly. Systems hummed in harmony. Weapons and shields fully functional. He looked out through the viewport at the night sky. The stars were distant and cold, but he no longer felt small. He felt like a human who had claimed the impossible. Then, in the distance, a faint signal appeared. A distress call from another human outpost under attack. Marek's grin widened. The warship was no longer scrap. The Guardian was no longer just a sentinel. Together, they were humanity's hammer, a weapon for survival and dominance. He turned to the Guardian. Its glowing eyes met his. He didn't need words. He knew it understood. Marek tapped a few controls, preparing for launch. The hangar doors began to rise, revealing the dark expanse of the planet's surface. The warship stirred. Massive engines igniting, vibrating the ground beneath them. As the craft lifted off, Marek felt the thrill of control. the rush of power, and the weight of responsibility. The Guardian moved beside him, a silent partner, a living reminder that humans were dangerous not because of technology alone, but because of their courage, their minds, and their ability to survive horrors that would destroy others. Above the planet, Marek activated the ship's full systems: cloaking, weapons, engines, sensors, all responsive, all ready. The aliens who had once laughed at the $1 hangar would never dare return.
Humanity, underestimated as always, had proven itself once again.
For he looked down at the hangar, small now against the glowing engines of the warship. The Guardian's hum resonated through the ship, almost like a purr, acknowledging that this human had been worthy. Marek grinned, feeling the thrill of victory and the promise of what was to come. The universe was vast, full of threats, full of horrors. But Marek knew one truth, simple and undeniable. Humans survived. Humans adapted. Humans conquered. And with the warship at his command, nothing would underestimate them again. As the stars streaked past the viewport, Marek whispered softly to the Guardian, "Let's see who else thinks they can challenge us." The Guardian tilted its head, silent but responsive. The warship was alive. The Guardian was awake. And humanity, through Marek, was ready for anything. The scrap ship was no longer scrap. It was horror. It was power. And it was humanity's weapon.